I'm excited. You've got somebody for me to meet?
Yes, just real quick for like 1 minute.
Oh, yeah, hey, however long, man.
This is my wife.
Hello, I'm
Hello.
Marty.
I'm Olabisi Helen.
Helen?
Yeah.
Yes. All right, Helen. Well, it's good to meet you. I've known Pastor James for almost 20 years.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Wow, that's great.
Absolutely. So,
Yeah. We were praying for some kids before school.
yes. That's right.
Yeah.
So that's good.
Well, congratulations. It's great to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
All right.
Pastor James.
Yes, sir.
It's good to see you, brother.
It's great to see you. Awesome. This is like a blast from the past, man.
It is a blast from the past. Yeah, and so we've got we could do some catching up a little bit.
Absolutely. Okay, good.
Because you were, like I said, you were a youth pastor in Belfair, Washington.
Yes. When I tell people about that, they don't believe me. At first, where is Belfair, Washington?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, man. Yeah, so upper left of the United States, rural, very rural town.
Yeah.
Right?
29% white.
Yes, right. So we have a Nigerian pastor in a 98%.
Single and unmarried.
Single and unmarried. Yes, that's right. In a So how was it? I mean, so you how long were you in the United States before you started pastoring at that church?
5 years. I was 5 years in the United States, and then I ended up in and I spent 10 years. I gave them my youth. Yep.
You sure did, in a big way. I mean, everybody knew you in the community.
Yeah.
And then from there, where did you go next? Because I want to say you were in like Chicago.
I went to Indianapolis for 3 years and pastored a Korean American church.
Okay. So you went.
That was not enough of a cross-cultural experience.
All right, so let's. I just want to do this in chunks here. So we have the Nigerian pastor in rural Belfair with 98% white guys, and then you go to Indianapolis, and now you're pastoring Korean Americans.
Second generation Korean Americans.
Okay.
Korean American Church, Presbyterian.
Okay.
And I moved from there to inner city, hardcore, most dangerous neighborhood on the south side of Chicago.
Oh, baby.
Gunshots, 10 funerals a year. Hardcore, officiating 10 funerals a year. Reaching 100 kids in a youth group for 3 years. And then I went to the north side, while also having a speaking ministry and seeing those kids come to Christ. And since I've left, over 10 of them have been lost to gun violence.
Oh my gosh, your heart, man! I mean, how is your heart with that?
Well, it takes a toll on you. When I stopped crying at funerals, I resigned. When you were a teenager who has 3 bullets in them, and you don't cry, something is wrong.
Man, that's great.
And 2 weeks ago, they were in your youth group. 2 weeks ago, they were, and 5 months ago, they were driving with you. And a year ago, you were having a funeral with their friend. Like you were in their friend. In the hip hop world, is called Parkway Gardens. When I tell people
Parkway Gardens,
you Google it. O Block. What Compton was in the 80s and 90s, O Block is right now. O Block.
Old Block. Okay.
No,
Wow, man, that's
Gangster's Disciple. Yeah. You Google it. You just Google Obama.
Okay. Okay. I'll do that. I'll do that. So, and now you're, and I want to come back to all these places because I think that there's a story to be told here, right? And some wisdom to be gained through your travels and the difference in the places that you've been. But you are, and when you were in Indianapolis, were you a youth pastor or
I was.
Okay, you were, and now you are.
Pastor, yeah. I'm still working with young people. I just finished youth group in Nigeria right now.
Okay.
With 15 teenagers.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So back in Nigeria. All right. So, one of the things that, when I was thinking about people to have on this podcast to share a message with this audience, you came to mind, and you come to mind for many reasons. So number one, you have a heart for Christ like nobody I've seen before.
Thank you.
You have a heart for youth like nobody I've seen before. And now you're mixing those two, and then you are going into these new places and you are pouring your heart into kids that are not your own, right? And you are adopting them into your family, which is, that's straight out of the gospel. That is like practically lived out, right?
I'm doing it for 20 years.
And the other thing that, yes. And you know what, the thing that stuck out to me is I remember sitting down with you, I think over coffee, and you said something that stayed with me. And you talked about how we raise kids in America and how it differed wildly from how it was in Nigeria.
Yeah.
Nigeria. And the respect and honor seemed to be missing in the United States. Does that sound correct to you?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Huge.
Yeah. So I would like this, and inevitably these podcasts go in multiple directions, in directions that I don't ever see. But I would like to kind of talk about the differences in the cultures between Belfair and Indianapolis and Chicago and Nigeria. And
sure.
What are those, what were boys missing? What did they have? And where does your wisdom land on, what are our boys needing and what are they missing?
I'm going to sound, by the time, do you want me to start now or when we start the podcast? Do you want me to go now?
We're going, brother.
Okay, all right.
We're going right now.
Let's fire up. Let's start going. Just keep asking, and I'll keep firing around. Go ahead. Where do you want me to start?
Yeah. So I want you to start with, let's start with where I knew you as a youth pastor in Belfair. What were you seeing in those youth?
Yeah. Well, what we're seeing in Belfair is that there were three things teenagers in Belfair lacked. Number one, they lacked examples of godly men and women. And they were not seeing godly men and women who were living out the gospel in practical ways, contextualized in Belfair. So they wanted to know, okay, if God is real, what does God look like as a blue-collar worker, church worker who has hobbies? And how does God help me feel the isolation and loneliness and depression that I feel living in Belfast? So one of the biggest things that I saw kids struggle with was relationships. They didn't know how to connect relationally. Because most people who moved to Belfast because they wanted to be away from people. They didn't want to be around people. They wanted to be away by themselves, which is not bad. But it was radical individualism, which means that there was a commitment to self-reliance, which is opposite of what the gospel calls us to. The gospel calls us to a community of faith, where we will go there later. If you contrast that, Africa, we're at extreme. We are very communal. And if the community is going this way, we all follow the community. If we spend $50,000 on a wedding, everybody wants to spend $50,000 because that's the way you do it. But the extreme is I am in charge of my life. I'm going to buy 2 acres, far from everybody. I'm going to build a nice house, internet service, get off the grid, don't talk to anybody, buy 4 guns, have 3 dogs, which there's nothing wrong with that, but I don't want to build a relationship with anybody. So what I struggle with in Belfast is the children had no concept of community, of building friends with people that they knew. Everybody knew everybody. Everybody knew details about people. But when it comes to correcting each other and challenging each other to embrace truth, and the gospel was something you did on Sunday. People came to church to pay homage to God, but they did not allow the gospel to transform their lives. So when people say, well, people in Belfast are different from people in Africa, no. People are people. What people don't allow the gospel to do is they don't allow the gospel to transform their lives. So when people ask me, what do teenagers in Belfast need? Teenagers, and my ministry in Belfast was effective because, number one, it was relational, hugely relational. You would see me often on school campus, sitting with kids, having conversation with kids, building relationship with kids, taking them to the airport diner with me after church because I couldn't have them in my home because I was a single guy. So the most effective youth workers in Belfast were those who were super relational, connected with the kids, connected with their families, prayed with their families, got to know them, and were vulnerable to people about their struggles in their marriage. But what we do is we find a church and we take that church like a package and we make it like a consumer product and we drop it into a community and we expect it to work. And that's the problem with a lot of churches in Nigeria and in America. Because, and here's why, a lot of churches and ministries cater to those who support them financially. They are not built to reach out to those who are outside the church. And what the problem is that to do that, we have to think as missionaries within our culture. If we walked out of our culture and we came in, what would we do different? How would we respond? Because the problem is that everybody in Belfast was not uber relational. Everybody got home, stayed by themselves, and churches didn't have a lot of small groups. That's why a lot of young people were finding themselves driving out of Belfast to go to churches, where churches were having cell groups, small groups, relationships. That's what people really needed. Because with the weather in Belfast, you know the weather. It's very rainy, not very exciting. Everybody's kind of down. We drink lots of coffee. We do hunting, fishing, but we never really engaged in relationships.
Wow, that's pretty profound. I will say that I'm a pretty relational guy, but I live on 10 acres.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
I do like alone time as well. I like time with my family.
Yes.
We aren't having new families over every weekend, right? And so are we, I'm a coach and,
yes.
I'm invested into our community.
You are.
But have I allowed truly the Lord to transform my life?
Yeah.
I am a stubborn man, James.
We all are.
So I can say yes and no to that.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
I'm grateful that you see my community.
Yeah.
That you came in here from far away.
From Nigeria.
And you saw this community from Nigeria. Yeah. You saw this community and you did not seek to change us, but to come to us and offer us something.
Yeah. I think
does that sound right?
That sounds exactly right. The word in cross-cultural ministry, and every ministry is cross-cultural if you're really honest with yourself, because every family, every socioeconomic status, every category of people or tribe, we have tribes. We all have tribes. You have guys who make $50,000 a year, people who make $200,000 a year, people who make 250. You have professionals, you have white collars. We all have tribes. And whenever you want to reach into a tribe, one of the things you learn quickly is you have to connect before you can correct. If you cannot connect, you cannot correct. And one of the ways to connect with people is you have to understand them and you have to respect them. There are 5 things I loved about people, about what I call Mr. and Mrs. Belfair. Number 1, they are hard working. They don't take their oil to get replaced by the oil loop. They fix everything. They don't buy new things. Number 2, financial independence. People in Belfair are not lazy. They are not waiting for the check for the government. I would say 80 or 90% of people I knew in Belfair were employed. They were going to Gig Harbor. They were going to Seattle. They were going to, Mr. and Mrs. Belfair are hard-working, middle-class Americans. Number 3, they were financially savvy. They wouldn't waste money on Starbucks every day. They didn't want to impress anybody. They were there. They were born and raised in Belfair. They went to North Mason High School. They go to games on Friday nights. They get to basketball games. And then number 3, they want to support the education. People in Belfair wanted their children to get a quality education, whether it's University of Washington, whether it was the tall superintendent guy, I forgot his name, with the glasses. Mark Floteau. Right. Yes, whether it was the Assembly of God Church, whether it was the BCBC, North Mason, everybody, when it came to supporting the school, man, all hands on deck. Everybody, whether it was the business community, I've forgotten the name, that met, the
Navy Yard?
No. The business community, they had an office, the Chamber of Commerce.
Oh, yes.
The Arts Club, scholarships. They were all about that. And then number 5, once people in Belfair loved you and trusted you, they were loyal to a T. There are some people who have been going to that AG church for 25 years. And that pastor, I forgot his name, he was there for 20 years, and they stuck with him. That was their man. You would rarely catch the old generation of people in Belfair that I knew from 2002 to 2010. Those people had been with their own pastor, their own church for at least 10, 15 years. They stuck with that pastor. So those are 5 things that I respected, I loved people in Belfair. And Belfair, too, was welcoming. The Belfair I know, if you were a visitor and you had a job and you didn't want to steal, people in Belfair will leave you alone to do your thing. They will not bother you. They would not harass you. They would not. It was welcoming as long as you worked hard, stayed focused, worked hard. They will help you. So that's one thing I loved about people in Belfair, is that once they got to know you, they were loyal and respectful to you. However, yes.
Yeah, you get excited.
Yes. So one thing I knew about a lot of them is that they were hardworking and disciplined.
But I imagine what comes with a lot of what comes with what you're saying is that I did this. I can do this on my own. I am a self-made man or woman. I have my ducks in a row. I've went out and got my finances, my job. I'm hardworking. I'm changing my oil. And a downfall to that is you don't need anybody else, right? And so there, I can see where it's hard to now transform that, because there's a lot to give up, and I know you're not being asked to give that up, but that's what it feels like, I think, sometimes.
Well,
so when
yeah.
you're dealing, yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. Please go ahead.
So you are now pastoring these youth that are being reared by these parents that are not, their lives haven't been transformed, if you will, and they're not community minded. Are you, when you were pastoring them, was it a long process to get these kids to be relational, and did that have a ripple effect out into their family, into their parents, into their siblings?
One thing I started doing was, one of the best strategy is I started asking myself every day, 5 days a week, I had a strategy. How can I serve? Who can I surprise, and who can I delight? Because I noticed that there were three things that a lot of people in Belfast needed that they would never articulate to me: affirmation, attention, and affection. And so
affirmation, attention, and affection.
Yes. And I would see men and I say, man, I just love your kids. I just love you, man. I appreciate you. And the first time when I tell guys I love them, they're just, come on, man. What kind of talk is that? You know? And so I started saying, hey, I love your kids. I just appreciate your kids. And I noticed that some people in Belfast were not used to people saying, I love your kids. I love your kids. I love being around your kids. I'm grateful for your kids. And every time I saw parents, I would always compliment them about their children. And I would always make sure that I made the kids feel like if they were the best thing around me. Now, I was very firm, and I would always champion their parents in front of them. And I was always encourage them to follow their parents, and I would champion them. And I would challenge them to think. And I always exposed them to other experiences beyond their life. And then I would ask questions. Why do you do this? Why do you do this? Okay, let me tell you a story. And I found out that one of the best ways to help people see the world from a different perspective is to tell stories. Stories about Africa, story about community, story about my experience. And just loving them and always reminding them that, hey, I'm a black man, but you know what? I love you. It's not a problem. It's just who I am. But it's not a problem. And I would constantly find places to affirm them and thank them. Like I would say to my church, you know what? I forgot. You make me forget that I'm black. I would thank them. Hey, I just love you. Oh, wow. I appreciate you. And I noticed that when I was affectionate toward them, it was very helpful. So because with that rugged individualism, there was a lack of communication of affirmation. So I always I found myself best as a pastor when I was the chief encouragement officer.
Yeah. And you know, real quick, I love it. I don't want to cut you off, but we are relational beings.
Yes,
we thrive off relation. We all thrive off of affirmation. But it's not always experienced. And when it's not experienced, then you don't know how to then give it. And then that perpetuates this culture that you are talking about.
Absolutely. And it's healthy affirmation, healthy affection, healthy. And asking questions, sometimes when from the outside, you demonize cultures. You Americans. No, I said, we as Americans, I reminded them, hey, I love this country. I appreciate, it's a privilege to live in America. You don't come down, you don't go to somebody's house and make fun of their couch because they gave you a place to live. I was an immigrant. I'm a visitor. I've been privileged. Millions of Africans want to come to America. Forget the negative mainstream media message that America is going down in tubes and people are destroying. There are people all across Africa and Asia who are dying to step on the grounds of America. America is the best place to live. It's one of the best places to live and one of the most blessed countries in the world. There's no place like America, right? When we as visitors go into America, it is not our job to tell Americans what's wrong with them. It's our job to tell us how to respond to one another as gospel proclaimers, as people who love Jesus. And just find ways to love them. Simple things like writing thank you cards, writing affirmation. I could tell you that when I was in Belfast, 75% of people received a thank you note from me or a note of encouragement.
Wow. Amen, brother.
Yes, sir.
Amen. And you talked about it was brief, but you said, I love these kids, but I was also firm. Can you give an example of what that looks like? Because I think that we, in our culture, as you know, there is very much, you're either one way or you're the other, and it's tough really to grasp what it looks like to be both. And it's a tough thing for me as a father to always grasp that balance between work and play, disciplinarian and playmate, and or a cheerleader, as I heard a pastor say as well.
Yeah, I think the balance is I want to spoil you, but I don't want you to act spoiled. I want to be, you understand? And that's how I would relate to my kids. I want you to have a great time, but don't act like a brat. I'm going to treat you like you're the greatest, best thing, but don't act like you're God's gift to the world. You are a gift to me, but when you mess around, I'm going to deal with it immediately. I'm not going to tolerate all nonsense. In fact, people say, oh, Pastor James, I once kicked my pastor's daughter out of youth group. Now she's one of my best friends on Facebook. Pastor Jim's daughter, Deborah, kicked her out of youth group because she was misbehaving. You have healthy boundaries. You open the door of acceptance, but you raise the bar of expectation. You open wide the door of acceptance, but you raise the bar of expectations. Everybody's welcome. But when you come in, we have some house rules. And rules are here to protect and help all of us. It protects you from me hurting you, and it protects me from hurting you. And you explain the why. But a lot of places, what they don't do is they lower the bar of invitation. Oh, you can't come in except you do this. You can't come in except if you have tattoos. You can't come in. No. Kids who have tattoos can come in. Kids whose mom is a single mom, you can come in. You get the same treatment. When we celebrate birthdays, if you have a tattoo, if you don't have a tattoo, if you come in smelling like weed, which some of them did, we're going to love on you. If I call you to read, I'm going to ask the kids, not just the homeschool kids, I'm going to get to read the Bible. The kids who are homeschooled, not only the homeschool kids get to. And then also, I had about 5 categories of kids, and every kid has rewards. And one of the things is you reward good behavior and you reward bad behavior. And you always want to catch them doing something good. A lot of people, the way they pastor or lead is to catch people doing something bad. Or they always catch them doing something good. Or they always reward good things, but they don't reward bad things. And I think there should be balance. You reward good behavior. Yes.
You reward good behavior, and did you say you reward bad behavior?
Yes, you reward it too. There are consequences.
Okay. Oh, there's consequences. Okay, so when you say reward, I'm thinking a positive reward.
No. Negative reward.
Yeah. I see what you. Yes. Good. On the same page there. So now let's go. Let's go to inner city Chicago.
Yes.
And talk about the relationship with those kids, and so we can see that difference, because we're going from rural Belfair, which is, your church was buried in the trees.
Yes, it was.
If there was a big windstorm, that building would not have made it.
No.
If the wind was blowing right and hard enough, that building wouldn't have made it. So now you go to
a tiny church in the middle of nowhere, and it was right across the school.
Right. In a town of a few thousand.
A town of 5,000, and 80% of people who worked in 60% of people who lived in town did not work in town. It was a bedroom community.
Yes,
Shipyard,
correct.
Harrison Hospital, Tacoma, Gig Harbor, Seattle. They take the ferry. Am I right?
Yes. Yeah, 100%, right. So now you go to inner city Chicago, which is almost as
it's 80%
180 degrees as you can get.
I could go a whole week and not see one white person in my neighborhood. The church was in Woodlawn, and I lived in Inglewood, Chicago. If you ask anybody what Inglewood looked like from the 15th century, think gunshots. I was sleeping one night, one of the worst nights of my life. I was sleeping, and I heard a girl screaming because she was being beaten. And I wanted to go out, but I was scared, and I hate to tell the story. And she screamed, and the next morning there was a homicide. She was killed by a family member.
Oh.
So that's Inglewood for me. I would be driving, and I would, this on 3 or 4, twice a week, at least twice. No, let me be more conservative. Twice a month, I'll be driving home, and I would be detoured by police, and I would literally look across the street. I would see yellow lines. I'm getting goosebumps as I say it right now. I'll see yellow lines, and I will literally, this almost feels like therapy because some of this stuff is hard to just talk about. I will literally see dead bodies with white blankets on it. You're a paramedic. Constantly with the tape and police and the coroner box. I remember vividly now what the coroner's box looks like. As they came. So I lived in Inglewood and Woodlawn. Teenagers being gunshots. Pow, pow, pow. I went, if you Google my name and you put Pastor James in Chicago, gunshots, I went to get pizza for my kids one night, and as I was pulling the pizza out, I heard pow, pow. And I had a knee-jerk reaction. I covered my body on some girls, 2 girls, put them on the ground. Shrapnel hit the girls. There was blood around them. And they took them to the hospital, and they interviewed me. And I finished that, and I went to preach in my youth group. And 20 kids gave their lives to Jesus. Because they were not listening to me. And this lady, African-American lady, got up and said, "Hey, listen, babies. Hey, this man almost got killed." I said, "I heard gunshots." They're like, "We can listen to you." And I asked them 2 years later why they listened to me. They said, "Since I got shot at, I became one of them."
Oh, man, that's a tough story. Excuse me. That's a tough story to hear.
Yeah. If you Google
because
it,
it's a reality. It's a reality that I have not known.
Oh, and I pray you or your children never know it. And it's not. Let me be very clear. It's not a race issue. It's a family issue. Our biggest problem as people of color in America, and I say this with all due respect to everything that's happened after George Floyd, our biggest problem is fatherlessness and gospel-centered churches and lack of education. Because I had kids in my youth group who were in the 8th grade and they could not read.
Wow. Wow. And and my daughter is in 2nd grade, and coming into this, she was reading in 1st grade, but I was worried that she wasn't reading enough, that she didn't have a good enough, right? So we're talking more about fluency and how fast she's reading, and not just can she read.
And they are the
8th
most
grade
resilient kids you will ever meet, and loyal. They love me.
I'm sure. And you brought up a couple things that some of the research that I was doing, when you look at some predictors of incarceration, whether you can read by the 4th grade is one of the largest predictors.
I don't know if this is true.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know either. And then, you hear a lot about fatherless homes as being a predictor as well. So, those are, education, fatherless homes. And what was the third one that you said? Oh, Christ-centered home.
Christ-centered churches, not religious.
Christ-centered churches. Okay.
I counted 45 churches within a 10-block radius of where I lived.
45 churches?
45 churches within a 10-block radius, 180 degrees, 45 churches within Inglewood and Woodlawn, 45 on the south side of Chicago.
Holy smokes. And how... And then, so you brought up a Christ-centered churches. Do you want to give a percentage?
I would say
that are Christ-centered.
I would say only about 10% of those churches are really being led by godly men who are living under the leadership of Christ. The black African American, my African American brothers and sisters in America are some of the most religious people you will ever meet. But we are some of the most, I didn't say them, I said we, as a people, are some of the most Christless people in our day-to-day culture choices. When we say things that we say...
And why is that?
Well, number one, the breakdown of the African-American family. Number two, the media has lifted up some icons and they are not family men. In the 50s and 60s, the icon of the successful man and women were movie stars, entertainers, and sports stars. In middle-class America, the respected men were all married on TV. Archie Bunker, even every entertainer had. You only had one entertainer who was married on TV. His name was Bill Cosby. And black families looked up to that. But they lived but the most successful men that young black boys look up to are entertainers and sports people, which we know are not real lives. So for a long time, the only black woman that black young girls saw on TV was an unmarried, very successful, childless black woman, Oprah. So you have, who's a wonderful woman, amazing lady. However, is she in a healthy marriage? You know, whenever the devil wants to destroy a culture, the first thing he destroys is the family. If I can destroy marriage, I can destroy the fabric of any culture. You know, so for those of us who live in Africa now, we are watching the dismantling of the African family because of westernization and social media. And so our young ladies are being discipled by social media. And our young men are being mentored and taught to pursue career before family. So they want to get the big house, the big car, the big fancy houses before they get married. So there's a prolonged adolescence where they are not using their singleness for the gospel. They're using their singleness to sleep with as many women as they want to. So there's no family, no desire to settle down, get a wife, get their kids, or invest in the next generation. So fatherlessness is huge. That's why I believe when Jesus spoke, he spoke a lot of God as a father. And when I was in Belfast, I even saw this. A lot of the fathers whose daughters were struggling were disconnected relationally from their daughters. So one of the things that we wanted to do that we never could do was to do father and daughters weekly dates or encouragement to take their daughters on dates or spend time, which I know you're a big fan of. So it's spending.
Oh,
yeah. So I think one of the missing elements, I've seen this in Alaska. I did some work every summer with kids in Alaska. I'm seeing it in Nigeria. Inactive fathers are destroying the world. Jordan Peterson talks about, I don't know if you've heard the name Jordan Peterson.
Oh, yeah.
And he talks about weak men and his definition of a weak man. And the most dangerous thing that's destroying, that I watched constantly, is men who will not become, boys who will never grow up to be men. And that's what was destroying both cultures.
So you had a list of things that were needed in Belfair for those boys, for those youth. What are the things that, and you've spoke about some of those things, but I want to be direct with them. What are the things in Chicago in those kids that they were needing? It sounds like fathers.
They needed to see healthy marriages working. Healthy marriages between a man and a woman. One of the mistakes I made, I said to myself, if I ever I should never have gone as a single man. God is very kind. God works despite our flaws. But 80% of my kids would have a conversation like this with me. Pastor James, where are your kids? I ain't married. I don't have no kids. Pastor James, just because you ain't married don't mean you don't have no kids. And what we're saying is, what are you talking about? You don't have to be married to have kids. Yes, you do. It helps your children when you're married, because when you're not married without kids, it sets you up for poverty. We love her. We're grateful for our single mothers, but that is not the God-prescribed environment for a child to thrive. God created an institution of marriage. Even when I was single, I was a big proponent of marriage. And so, number one, they needed to see healthy marriages. Number two,
hey, before you go to two, Pastor, I want to acknowledge them, because you said that you should have been married before you went out.
Yes.
However, one thing I'm hearing, though, is you got an opportunity to show these young people what it looked like to be a godly single man. Yes. And you could tell them, no, I don't have kids because I'm not married.
Yeah.
I'm loving and in relationships with people for Christ. And even though I don't have my own kids that are in this group, you are finding a hole in your community, and you are filling it with the love of Christ, and you're giving your soul to something. And then to be able to tell those kids, no, I'm not married. so I can't have kids. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I would imagine that, like you said, I mean, these kids' eyes are probably like looking up into the left part of their brain, searching for answers, like this doesn't seem right.
Absolutely.
But also that's very telling of that culture too. So, but I just want to say, man, kudos to you for living a godly life before being married and pouring into so many and following his calling.
Thank you. And,
yeah, you bet.
And being a youth pastor who was not trying to leverage the relationships I had with the parents of the single mothers for my own satisfaction, if you know what I mean. They were surprised. They were blown away that when mothers who were attractive had teenage sons and teenage daughters or preteens, and they would reach out to me, I made a point that was not my God-given purpose to engage in that kind of relationship. And it was a battle. It was tough. It was hard, like, what's wrong with him? Is he gay? Is he okay? What's wrong with you? You're 30 something, you look good, you're educated, you have a job, you love kids, but you don't want to spend time with me on a weekend trip to a vacation with me. Well, I only do that with married people.
Well, because because we're consumers. We're not driven necessarily by values first. We consume first and put our values and honor next. Honor culture is not a very prevalent thing here in America.
Yeah, all over the world is becoming like that. Very much so. It used to not be that way, but now we are all exposed to the same trash and same level of entertainment trash because we are now a global communication. So an African is watching YouTube for 5 hours a week and they are being exposed to the worst of Western culture. And so, so the first thing is healthy marriages. Number two, healthy marriages with a godly father or just a hard-working man. Because it's hard for you to aspire to something you've never seen. Bad habits are not taught. They are caught. Values are caught. So when your mom is a single mom and she can't hold a job because she has to take care of 3 of you, and she's had 3 different men in her life, it's hard for you to value marriage. And all your aunties, I know children in my youth group, 70% of children in my youth ministry, I'm not saying about anybody else in Chicago, 70% they don't know anybody in their life who has been married for more than 10 years under the age of 50.
Wow.
Under the age of 50. But all of them,
that's telling.
All of them know someone over the age of 25 who has 2 children or more. So, healthy marriages, hardworking men. Number 2, a sense of discipline. Just that discipline that I said that Mr. and Mrs. Belfair had of working hard and financial discipline, that was not there. Now, it was replaced. Another thing that was there was massive dependence and over-dependence on community. If I need this, ask this one. If I need this, hey, borrow me $5. Hey, so you make money. The first thing is you share it with your community. You hit a paycheck. You get a paycheck, you spend it all. No sense of the future. Because, hey, you don't know how long you're going to live. You could get shot tomorrow, right? So there was no emphasis on caring for, preparing for the future. You know, you have a birthday at 18, you buy $1,000 shoes, $200 shoes, $300 shoes. Why? Because you don't have a hope for the future. You don't have a college education you want to plan for. You don't believe in education, which is the third thing, a lack of hope that education, because if you don't know anybody who went to college in your family, why should you pursue a college education? You know?
Yeah.
So, and then an obsession with instant gratification. I want it now, where you have people in Belfair who just worked all the time. So you have two extremes. People who are always, they are fatalistic, right? Fatalism is when whatever happens, whatever is going to happen will happen. I'm just going to hope on it. I'm just going to wait for the universe to do its thing, Mother Earth, and they tie that to being African. I just hope for the best. And then you have the extreme of, hey, I trusted myself. So those two extremes. One, trust in happenstance. That's the extreme in Chicago. I have no hope. There's no hope. Or we just have faith. And then the ones is, I trust in myself. But the gospel says, you trust in God and the community of faith.
Yeah. Yeah. So on the tales of telling about the things that were needed in Belfair, you were also able to tell me about what those people in Belfair, the positives about them, and you've spoken about some of those in Chicago. So tell me about the things that we can be learning from people in Chicago.
A radical sense.
By the way that
resilience. Like, man, my friend got shot. We're going to a funeral tomorrow. They grab their backpacks and go back to school. We five kids got shot on the way to school. Okay, tomorrow, hey, we'll cry, we'll weep. Tomorrow, put you on the spot and they go back. People get shot in my neighborhood. I'm going back. You know, I'm not living in my neighborhood. I'm just going to stay there. You know, there was a sense of, man, you know what? It's bad. Okay, next, let's move on. You know, some of that had results of mental illness, but it was such a resilient and grit that some of those kids have that I don't see in middle class kids. You know, because they don't have chance to make excuse. They don't have time to whine and complain. Life is hard. So what? Next. Number two. Hey, I need help. The adults. There were certain adults there who were there, and they were saying, whether you like it or not, I'm going to force you to succeed. There were some adults there. In every inner city community, you have 2 or 3 people in the neighborhood, in the schools. These are principal school teachers, and they assume the role of mother, pastor, doctor, teacher. I mean, the best pastors I knew were public school teachers on the south side of Chicago, because they were not there to teach. They were there to give their lives away to the kids. And
wow. And amen to those brothers, right?
Yeah. To sisters.
And sisters, brothers. Yeah.
80% of them lived in the suburbs, would drive an hour to go to school, to the public school. And once they got there, they would use their paychecks to buy kids shoes to go to school. They would pick up schools. They would stay after school for 2-3 hours, work with students, help them get their grades up, help them with homework. They would give homework after school, stay and help the kids do their homework. And there were kids in there who said, okay, I don't want to be like my mom. I have one. Her name is Nia. Nia is still my friend on Facebook. Nia said to me, Pastor James, my mama didn't go to college. My daddy didn't go to college. I don't even know my daddy. I don't know my auntie. My auntie's a social worker. But Pastor James, I don't want to be like my mama. I don't want to be like my uncle. I want to be better for myself. And guess what? She's working on a master's degree right now. She's finishing up. And she said to me, Pastor James, I don't want to be like anybody in my family. I want to be different. And I've met about 5 or 6 of them. She's not pregnant. She's single. She's still in school. She's had a job since she was 15. And she said to me when she was 16, when she met me, I remember we were at McDonald's. Pastor James, I don't want to be like nobody in my family. So there was a radical sense of determination that some of those kids had, that I don't want to be like anybody around me. And they were looking for a ticket and a job to get out.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it, right? Sounds like it would be, but like you're saying, for some, that hope's just not there.
Yeah.
But something inside of her propelled her to hope.
Yeah, some of them go to a funeral and they leave and go, I'm not going to be in that casket. I'm not going to be. Some of them there were some of them who just had a radical determination and nothing could stop them. They had a schedule. Work, school, home. I'm home at 6. And there were some mothers there right after school. They grab their children. They lock them in the house. They go to work. And if you leave that house, she will beat the living daylights out of you. And the kids knew that Mama was not playing, because Mama said, I got pregnant with both of you before I was the age of 21. And I got saved. I got a job at 25 at a bank. And now I'm a bank manager. And you're 7 and 8 years old. And I am not getting married till you both graduate college. And you're going to do 2 things. You're going to go home and you're going to come to school. You're going to go to school. And I'm going to make sure that the only adults that you're going to meet are adults who have a job, they have a vision and a mission for their life, and that's it. And you are not going to be like any of the men who were like your fathers. And some of those precious women, I met them, they would enroll their kids in high-level, very expensive public schools, private schools, where they would go in and beg them for a scholarship for their child. And the tuition was probably $50,000 a year for those private schools. And they would say, hey, I'm a single mother. I have a college degree. I've been working to get it. I got it in 3 years. This is a real story. And I can afford $3,000 a month to put my kid in your private school. But could you please give me $1,000 a month? I'll pay. I make $3,000 a month. I have a good job. I have 2 children. And if you don't help me, my children will become like me. And the private school says, sure, we'll do it. And it radically changes the trajectory of those kids' lives. So I met some very intentional people who looked around them and they saw everything around them and they said, and they had the spirit of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. We will not bend, we will not bow, and we will not be like them. And our children and us will be 10 times better, but we're gonna live in here. We're not gonna go anywhere. In this Babylon, we're gonna live here. And our kids are gonna be accused of speaking white and talking like they are white. And we're gonna expose them to other people of other cultures. But they will not be like people around us. So I said there were some highly disciplined people there.
Yeah. And it's hard to, it doesn't matter if you're white or black. It doesn't matter if you're coming from the suburbs or the inner city. To change the trajectory of your life from what it is it does have to be radical, because you are going to be called an Uncle Tom. You're going to be called a disloyal such and such, because you are doing something different. I know that my family would call me preacher sometimes when I was trying to teach them new things or new ways, and it wasn't that was not a nice title to be given.
Yes.
They were not saying it as you're a great man. And when I had things, it was things that were wanted.
Yes.
And if I would not give them readily, then I'm, excuse my French, but I'm an asshole now.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I get that.
Right. And so,
right.
and so it doesn't matter really where you're at. The same holds true because loyalty is a massive thing. And I would say it's probably, it just looks different in each culture. Right. But
that's very true. That's very true.
Yeah. So now you're in Nigeria. Mm-hmm. How much time do you have? How much time do you have here, boss?
I have about 20 more minutes, but yeah.
20 more? Okay,
yeah.
Yeah. So I want to tie some stuff together, but I want to talk to you about Nigeria now. So you're in Nigeria and you're a youth pastor. You're still a youth pastor.
I'm still a youth pastor.
And now you are married.
I am married.
Got a beautiful bride. Man, so when I put this up on my website, I would like to put a picture of you and your wife in your
Please do.
Beautiful purple. It is, it's phenomenal. You guys look beautiful. You look happy. And I know this has been a hope for you or a dream for you to have a wife, because I remember talking to you about that.
20 years. 20 years I've been praying for
20 years.
Yes.
Yeah. What a good God, but what a patient man you are.
Well, it wasn't all perfect. I had some flaws, hiccups on the road, but God, let's just say God has been gracious and kind to me. I have.
Yes.
He's preserved me. I have not preserved myself. God has preserved him. All glory and praise be to him.
Amen.
Yes.
All right. So let's talk about the needs for young men in Nigeria.
The scary thing about Nigeria right now is that social media is taking over their mind, and everybody wants to make instant wealth quickly. So they are very driven. I love that about us. We are very intelligent, very driven. But we have a leadership crisis in Nigeria. We're a country led by demons, for lack of a better term. We are very, very evil men. And that is not just a religious term, not just a label. We are led by very, very evil, demonic men, because they watch three things happen, and it's strictly from Scripture. They steal, they kill, and destroy lives. And there are policies that are being overlooked. There are laws that are not upheld. There are people who work and are not being paid, government workers. Our public universities right now are on strike because they will not pay them. The government will not release funds, and they are being led by evil men. So, unfortunately, I tell people all the time, Black lives don't matter in Nigeria, and they don't matter a lot. And so the issue here is that the trauma that the average Nigerian has gone through because of lack of security, lack of economic stability. One American dollar is 700 Nigerian dollars. Nigerian dollars are called naira. So for $1, you have 700 naira. 50% of Nigerians make less than 100,000 naira, which is $100,000. But if you go out to eat and you want to have a nice meal for a family of 4, you will spend, and you want to enjoy the meal, you're going to spend, in a nice city in Nigeria, you're going to spend 20,000 naira. But the average Nigerian makes about 50, 60, 70, 80,000. And teachers, I run a school, my average teacher makes about 25, 20, some make 15,000 naira. So they can live on. Yeah.
So you're telling me that a paid teacher in Nigeria would have to pay more than their annual salary to buy a meal out.
If they wanted a fancy meal in a nice restaurant, if they wanted to go to an airport diner, they would be paying a quarter of their salary. If in a private school. Now, if they work in a public school, they would probably be paying 10% of their salary. So a public school teacher could make 70 or 80,000 naira. If they took their family out to eat, a family of 4, they would spend about 7 to 10,000 naira. That's 10% of their paycheck a month.
Yeah.
Where an American teacher makes about 40,000, 50,000 a month. They take their family out to eat. They spend $100 because the middle class exists. There's a middle class in America. There's no middle class in Nigeria. There is starving, 1 meal family. Then you have 3 meals families. Then you have families who are getting by on 3 meals. Not 3 full meals, and then you have those who are privileged, who have more than 7 meals a day, or can enjoy 7 meals a day. Then you have those who are spending $70,000, 7,000 naira in one day, and they don't feel. So the middle class is empty. But there's a huge, about 25% who are making it, killing it. Then there's the 10% on top. So 35% are super comfortable. And moi is part of that 35% because of my American education.
Sure. So how does that translate now to these kids that you're seeing? What effect does that have on them?
They don't
their
believe
relationship.
they don't believe that they can succeed without being corrupt, cheat, or lie. There's no way up. They cannot finish a college education without having sex with a professor to get good grades. If you ask the average girl,
because value, like you said earlier, you said values are caught, right? Not taught.
Yeah, so they don't believe. So if they don't believe, they need to tell the truth.
Yeah.
They don't believe that stealing 2,000 naira from someone who makes 200,000 naira is wrong. And I don't blame them.
Right. That's Robin Hood story, right?
Yeah, I mean, hey, it's that or I starve. 50% of girls in my youth group or boys in my youth group tonight are going to go home and spend 50 cents on food. And some of them are going to go home on an empty stomach.
Yeah, that's hard to have hope, isn't it?
It is hard to have hope. So it's a pervasive sense of hopelessness, helplessness, and learned laziness. Why should I work hard? So I have to monitor teachers. I have to put cameras in class to make sure teachers don't leave and take another job. Because there are some teachers who work at a job and they leave that job and go take 2 jobs and pretend just to make a living for their children.
So if you don't have a middle class, and it sounds like really you need to be corrupt or evil to get somewhere. How are you what is their work? What is the value in them working hard? I mean, I'm saying, like, I mean, I'm here on the other. That's a real question. I mean, obviously, but I mean, what do you do if your hard work doesn't mean squat?
You convince them,
with exception of the internal value.
You convince them every time you meet them that there's somebody bigger than the government that can reward you in ways that will blow your mind and that you can trust them. And that I used to live in a town where nobody knew me, nobody helped me, but God gave me favor. I went to a town, I didn't look like anybody, I spoke with an accent, I smelled funny, I talked funny, but God gave me favor that when I left that town, people are still calling me from that town because they still miss me. And there are people from that town who are still supporting me every month to preach the gospel to you. So if I came from this town and God elevated me and took me out to America and gave me a formidable ministry in America, and I'm preaching all over America and I get flown to America 3 times a year, if God can do it for me, he can do it for you. You just have to be patient and you have to trust him even when it doesn't make sense. So I tell him, you can depend on God, be disciplined, be discerning, be determined, and be diligent. Those are my 5 core values I preach when I'm here. Depend on God, be disciplined, be discerning, be diligent, and be determined. It's not going to be easy. You're going to get a lot of no's, but God is bigger than everything that's set around you to make you fail. And I just got to love on them. I have to ask them, what can I ask you tonight? What kind of giveaways do you want? I want a phone. Okay. What are you going to use the phone for? To contact my family if I'm in trouble. What else do you need? I need a calculator, a scientific calculator. Okay, what else? Oh, I want novels. I want books so I could read and expose myself. I need pens, papers. You should see when I give backpacks to kids, when I give them school supplies, because it's their ticket out of poverty, because they get it. When I can get an education, I can stand up above my peers and get an education and move on. And I just tell them, depend on God, because God can open doors that man closes.
Yeah. And we are about out of time here, but I want to ask you about the things that we can learn from and things that are from Nigerian youth.
Yeah. I think
from that culture, what's the strengths there?
The strengths that I learned from my youth is a radical sense of submission to culture. There are some certain cultural values that are brought from one generation to the other. Like when the kids come into my youth group, the girls literally kneel down because it's cultural to greet me because I'm older, I'm twice their age, I'm a dad in their life. Kids never call me by their first name. There's an honor code in my Yoruba culture. You never address an adult by his first name. So that's huge. And kids in my church never call me Pastor James when they see me. They always call me Daddy. And it's crazy coming from America. But the culture is there's a high regard for the father figure. Most churches, they call their leaders Papa. Papa, our spiritual Papa, our spiritual daddy. Some of them call my new bride Mama. So there's this huge appreciation for family and honor for adults and those in authority. Number 2, the African youth are very, very hard working. They're not lazy. They will burn the night oil. They'll stay up till 2 studying. They'll go to school. You see 70% of kids in my town walk to school or take public transportation, and they get up. And you see, when I'm driving to school, you will see hundreds of children on buses, on public transportation, going to school, waking up at 6 o'clock in the morning in the dark, taking a shower, drying themselves in the dark, no electricity, taking a shower, just going. I'll see kids doing homework because they couldn't do it in the dark. There was no light and there was no candles. So in the morning, they wake up at 6 o'clock and they take a shower, and you see them at 7 o'clock doing homework or 6 o'clock, because they get to the bus stop 30 minutes or 40 minutes early so they could do homework. Why? They didn't have electricity last night. And they just find ways to do it. And then number 3, what I love about them is they are flexible. They don't allow things to stop them. They see death, they see despair, they see violence, they see insecurity. They hear people are being kidnapped all the time. Girls are being kidnapped for sexual slavery, but it never stops them. College, university age students, girls, they are passionate about God. They want to serve God. They know God is their only hope. The average girl in Nigeria could sell her body to men for $40, $50 a month, but most of them will never give their body up. I don't care how much money you give them. They have a strong faith in God. They are and sometimes that radical faith turns into religious fanaticism. What's that word?
Fanaticism?
Yes. But young people in Nigeria do not play with church or God. They just believe God is my only hope. They are driven by faith. So if you start a children's ministry, we have 100 kids coming to our doors every week. And we spend a lot of money on snacks. But some of them, that's dinner, right? For some of them. They have lunch, they have one meal, they have another meal, but that biscuit and snacks on Sunday night is a highlight of their life. That's the only dessert they have. Their parents don't have the money to go buy them a nice snack. It's not that they won't want to, but this happy hour I give them, the small juice I give them, and biscuit is like a nice treat for some of them. So.
Wow. Pastor James, I have loved this. I'm going to call this part 1 because I'm going to ask you to do a part 2.
Okay.
Because I think that now we've kind of have this, there's an understanding of these 3 different
worlds,
places that you've been, and there was a 4th.
Yeah.
There was a 4th, but there's 3 distinct differences here. There's strengths and needs and all of those, and I want to come back and I want to kind of wrap ourselves around what does it look like, to meld all the things that are great in each of those cultures together, and what do we find? How can we explore what it looks like to start preparing our youth to be emotionally resilient, hardworking, value driven, honoring, feeling loved, and also be Christ centered. And there's so much more there. Also, is there a way that people listening and I can support what you're doing?
Yes, absolutely. If you go to jamesowolabi.com, there's a donate button. You can give there, and you could send me an email. If you don't like to give online, there's a mission organization in Tennessee, Baptist World. They accept donations from me so that you can get a tax-deductible gift. But jamesowolabi.com/donate. And if you cannot spell Owolabi, go to nigeriaforjesus.com. nigeriaforjesus.com. Nigeria, FOR, for Jesus.com, will take you to my website, and that will take you to a donate page. And we are praying that God will give us more people to be monthly supporters of one-time givers of large gifts. We are praying for that. So super excited. And I'm in the U.S. twice a year to preach too. So
okay,
excited.
well I'm going to go there because I have never been to your website before.
Yes,
I'm going to check that out. Because if you're here in the States, I want to check you out. Maybe I'm going to add that to my bucket list to get to Nigeria to check it out.
That would be great. We would love to have you.
But Pastor, I am one of those people from the small town of Belfair who still loves you, still misses you, and thankful. And I'm still gaining knowledge and wisdom from a man who has given his life for youth around the world.
Thank you. Love Belfair. Still visit Belfair.
Yeah.
Quite often. Yeah.
Very good. Well, I hope to see you soon, talk to you soon.
All right.
Enjoy time with your lovely bride, and look forward to talking to you again.
Thank you. All right.
All right. Yes. Thank you, sir.
You are.